and filing it on something called Schedule C. So on the 1040 tax return, there are different schedules. Schedule A, B, C, D, E, F. F is for farming income. Schedule C is really just your profit and your loss from your freelance job. So, or freelance, small business. So the 1099 income, along with any other income you received, including cash or checks that you didn't get 1099 for, should be reported in total within the Schedule C. So if you look at a Schedule C, it'll be the top area of gross income, shows that total amount. And one thing I do get a question about, and the IRS is becoming very particular, is if you do get a 1099 issued to you and you don't report it. So let's say you report the income, but you don't include the other information like your employer identification number or the name. If you don't actually match up each 1099, then you can get a notice because the IRS has automated aspects of the audit process. So it's really important that each 1099 you get, you enter not just the amount, but the actual employer identification number or SSN from wherever you got it from, and the name of the person who received it from.
Okay. And on the next page, I think we have the Schedule C form shown.
Oh, awesome. I'm going to skip ahead just so we can see it. So, yeah. So here you can see the Schedule C is so beautiful, beautiful tax forms. It looks more complicated than it is, but the crux of it is under this Part 1 where it says income is where all of your 1099 income and anything else will flow through. So it flows through to this area right here. And then aside from that, up top, I know the top portion is a little confusing. So here it says principal, business, or profession. So taking the same example of graphic design, you'll be in graphic design. If you have a DBA, then you would include the DBA under business name. If you don't, leave it blank. Business address, you can use your home address. And then accounting method, sorry?
Oh, sorry. Even if, and I know we, again, have this in a later slide, but since it's coming up now, if you live in an apartment where they say you can't list it as a business address, can you still put it on this form?
If they specify that, then you can put a PO box instead as a business address. If someone does specify, hey, you're renting here, I don't want you to use this as a business address, then yes, you can use a PO box here instead.
Okay. Cool.
Most of the time you'll be on cash basis. Accrual usually it means that you record the income once you've invoiced it, not once you've received it. So that's the key difference there.
Okay.
The code on the right hand side under B is essentially going to specify the type of industry you're in. So each industry type has its own code. And if you are filing your taxes through a tax preparer or online, then they will give you kind of an option to go in there and assess which type of code fits. And all of your income and expenses should kind of be in that range. So if you're a graphic designer and you're spending thousands of dollars on clothing, that's going to be a problem. Right? So like those types of situations where you want to make sure they fall under certain thresholds. So as long as your expenses are reasonable, most of the time that's not an issue, but anyways. So if we keep going down, so the Part 1 shows your income, Part 2 shows all of your expenses. All of these expenses are kind of like the general idea of what you can claim under a Schedule C. However, if you go onto the right side, you'll see under Part 5, under other expenses, you can list out line by line expenses. And we'll go over more on how to claim those business expenses, but this is the overview of the Schedule C. I will really quick touch base on Part 3 is cost of goods sold. So if you are purchasing materials, right, and using them, I see this a lot for Etsy businesses, especially online, where if you're purchasing something like if you make hats and you have to buy a lot of clothing or cloth and glue and I don't know, glitter, whatever you're purchasing would be considered cost of goods sold. We do have a client who sells hats. That's why I came up. We do have a client as an Etsy business who sells hats, so that's why I mentioned it. But that would go under cost of goods sold. And then information on your vehicle, which is Part 4, is going to be information in regards to the mileage on your vehicle. So We can
Okay.
go into more depth on that one a little later, but let me finish this one up. So if you do create a corporation or an LLC, if you create a single member LLC, which means you're the only person who owns your LLC, then in the state of California, it is attached on your tax return and it's reported under your Schedule C, which is why I don't always recommend creating a single member LLC because it does not provide any tax benefits. However, when you create an S corporation or a partnership return with an LLC attached, then and you separated that out, that will be reported on the tax return, the separate tax return, and it's considered a pass-through entity, which means it flows from the corporation to you as an individual. You still report it on your tax return. It's on a form called a K-1, but it is not going to be reported in terms of your income and expenses on your tax return. You're just going to see the total net amount. So if you made $100,000 in your corporation and you, after expenses, showed $50,000 as your income, that's what's going to flow through on the K-1 to your individual tax return.
Okay.
Yeah.
Totally.
I think we talked about what if I'm working for a friend, not a corporation.
Mhm.
So, yeah. Does this answer all of your questions and maybe your friends' questions?
One question that I had looking at the Schedule C, or whichever, what the form was that we were just looking at.
Yeah, Schedule C.
Schedule C. All right. Was what if you have two, if you're like really side hustling, but you have two totally different things that you're doing, and so listing, the cost for one wouldn't really make sense for the other. Do you have to file two different ones, or can you only file one of these?
That's a great question. So yeah, that's a really great question. So if you do have separate, really, really separate ones, I do recommend filing separate Schedule Cs. I know that it's more expensive if you are working at the tax preparer, but it is worth it, especially because, again, Schedule Cs tend to get audited a lot. Maybe this is a little bit more of, from the accounting perspective, there is more potential to get audited here.
Mm-hmm.
So because there's more potential to get audited under a Schedule C, it is good to separate them out if you can. If you're in a situation where things are very similar, like I know later on we're going to talk about Uber and Lyft, not really freelance stuff, but Uber and Lyft they're both rideshare services. You're doing similar types of activities. In that stage, it makes sense to file them under one, and you can call it rideshare. But if you are filing with the Schedule C with really separate things, then I would recommend filing separate Schedule Cs.
Let's say I'm like, if I was doing graphic design and then like art and trying to like sell some art, or no, because then you're selling and it's a totally different thing. Never mind.
No, but when you are selling, you can totally put it on the Schedule C. And when you're selling art, if you're painting, then you don't really have, like, you'll have some costs, like you'd have like the canvases you buy, the paint, all those things, which are expenses you can claim.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do want to separate them out, I do recommend doing that.
Okay.
I will say that things that are creative tend to be similarly structured or like similarly coded within that code up here where it says enter code. Mm-hmm. So if you fall under the same type of code at that stage, I'd say file them together. But I do think that if you have separate DBAs, then you do want to separate them out.
And where do you find that code?
That's a great question. You can find all the codes online. We find it within our tax software, so that's where I typically see it. But they do have all the codes online. So if you look up Schedule C code, you'd be able to know all the different types of codes